We began worship the same way every Sunday morning with number 188 in your hardback hymnal or written on your heart or on yonder screen. Come, come, whoever you are. We sing it twice in English, then we change the key and sing it in Spanish. Will you join us in song, friends?
And the slides.
Wait for the slides. They're coming.
There we go.
Lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come,
Though you've
come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Otra vez.
Ven, quien quiere seas, vagabundo, fiel amante de parte, nuestra no es procesión de perder. Ven otra vez, ven otra vez, ven.
Good morning. Welcome to Second Unitarian Church of Omaha's multi-platform worship service. My name is Lorraine Duggan. I use she and her pronouns, and I have the privilege of being your virtual worship associate this morning with Reverend Juniper Meadows, our settled minister there in the sanctuary. A special welcome to any visitors today. We invite you to stay after today's service for coffee and conversation. If you're on Zoom, please stay for the breakout rooms so we can get to know you better. We welcome all of you this morning, no matter who you are, whom you love, what your background may be, whatever your faith, if any, or your beliefs. We encourage you to participate with your whole self, your doubts, your fears, your challenges, or whatever you may be facing in your life, as well as your gifts and aspirations. Wherever you are in your spiritual journey, we invite you to join us in community. We recognize that every person who visits or joins this church enriches all of us. We strive to live by our values: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity, with love at the center. Our mission is to become more authentic, compassionate, and transformative human beings in all aspects of our lives. We share a vision of world community that embraces diversity, justice, and respectful stewardship within the interdependent web of existence. Please make yourself comfortable during the service. We invite you to move your body as needed during worship. We have fidget toys for all ages at the back of the church if you, at any time, you wish to get up and move. We do ask that you silence your phones to avoid disruptions in the service. Our Soul Matters theme for November is Nurturing Gratitude. Today we'll explore the Evolutionary Epic with Reverend Juniper Meadows as we celebrate 165 years since the publication of On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin, and express gratitude for the miracle of our being and becoming. Now, for our first act of worship, please greet those next to you, and on Zoom, please unmute yourselves to greet one another.
As we turn to our chalice lighting, Lorraine has a chalice lighting for us this morning.
Our chalice lighting today comes from the Oberlin UU Church Fellowship in Oberlin, Ohio. We light this chalice for the web of life which sustains us, for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being, for the earth, the sky, above and below, and for our Mother Earth, and for the mystery.
Thank
And
you.
now we'll have our covenant. Sarah will put the slides on the screen. Rather than reciting creeds or professing dogmatic beliefs, this church practices covenants, which are sacred promises we make on how we'll relate to one another as a faith community. This covenant goes back to the church's founders and is adapted from James Philip Blake. Please say the words with me. Love is the spirit of this church, the quest for truth, its sacrament. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another believe more fully in life. Because Spanish is our second most spoken language in the United States, in the spirit of inclusivity, we'll also say the covenant together in Spanish. Please just do your best. El amor es el espíritu
de nuestra iglesia,
la búsqueda de la verdad, nuestro sacramento. Y esto es nuestro acuerdo, que convivamos en paz, que busquemos la verdad en el amor y que nos ayudemos uno al otro a creer más en la vida.
Thank you, Ashley. Change can be hard to grapple with. The reality of evolution can be a lot to take in, the big scales of time that make up the life of this planet. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Reverend Juniper Meadows. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a tall, curly-haired woman in a colorful clergy robe and a stole with a luna moth and a chalice. It's my pleasure to be your settled minister here at Second Unitarian Church of Omaha. Hearing about Charles with fossils made me think about adventuring with my papa in Rockwood, Tennessee. He showed me a place he would often go as a boy. He would cross an extremely dangerous train trestle, which my papa probably should not have taken me on. I mean, a bridge where trains were not going down anymore, but still a long ways down. On the other side, there was all this slate, and he would take a chisel and crack them open, and once in a while, you'd find a little plant in there. Blew my mind as a young child. I was a Discovery Channel kid. When Discovery Channel still showed science and nature. Steve Irwin kind of stuff, rest in peace, Steve. But a different great man today. We're talking about, of course, Charles Darwin. But as I was saying, change can be difficult to grapple with. We perceive this world as a relatively stable happening. Emphasis on relatively, but an inquiring and honest mind will admit that nothing is truly consistent in the biggest of pictures. As our Unitarian forebear Ralph Waldo Emerson would say, a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. Whatever genius sets the stars to motion is surely not possessed of any such limitation, for everything changes over those longest arcs of time. And dare I say, hallelujah for such a thing, and hallelujah for the mind that would peer past the obvious and share its revelation and change the world in turn, revealing just how truly interrelated all life on this planet must be. So may we hold gratitude for belonging to such a wide and wonderful and honestly weird family as that which covers the whole of this planet. And I generally shy away from great man models of history, but once in a while there does come a singular figure who reveals so much that their story bears repeating. So as Ashley said in our story, Charles Darwin, born February of 1809 in Shrewsbury, England, to an Anglican and pertinent to us, a Unitarian family, raised by staunch abolitionists, and brought up to be curious. The kid is putting beetles in his mouth. A young Darwin would spend so much of his time collecting beetles that it irritated his father. He was truly possessed of a natural bend towards the sciences and comparing this bug to that bug, noting similarities and differences. At the time, modern scientific sway held that the earth was not a few thousand years old, in the care of a benevolent but distant Father God, covered in creatures with fixed and unchanging species, And as for humans, many believed quite wrongly that there were over a dozen different species of human, an idea which would fuel some of the worst atrocities people ever dreamed up against one another. But Darwin's family, while very much products of the Victorian era, were nonetheless deeply opposed to slavery, abolitionists themselves living in a time and place where slavery had only been recently outlawed. I emphasize this, for while Darwin would not be considered an anti-racist by our standards, there is a great deal of misinformation as to the intent of his work and his alliances around the wicked institutions, both of his time and our own. Much of the hateful field of eugenics has attempted to draw upon his work, but these would dismiss Darwin's insistence on the oneness of the human family. They would apply the idea of survival of the fittest to the human condition, where Darwin only used that term sparingly and only beginning in the 5th edition of The Origin of Species. Mostly, he did this due to the confusion around the idea of natural selection, with many assuming that selection must infer some kind of observer making choices rather than the chance relationships between creatures and their environment. He wrote often of his disdain for slavery, first truly encountering it on his voyage. He called it an evil institution. He hated it with no possibility of redemption. Given its ubiquity, though, within the colonies and its entrenchment within the economic systems of his time, it is little wonder so many who profited from these systems of violence and abuse would find cause to gripe at the revelations of Darwin's work and would attempt to subvert it to preserve their own stations. And I digress, of course. There is much to be done in our own time for the liberation of the oppressed and the abolition of racist institutions. And while not an active figure in the movement of breaking chains, Darwin is certainly a leading figure in the campaign of opening minds. To quote Emerson again, who read On the Origin of Species shortly after publication, he called it the most important book of our age, and he may well be correct. We also have pretty good evidence that Darwin read Emerson. They are contemporaries. Darwin also rightly quoted, "A foolish consistency is a hobgoblin of a small mind." Very fitting for someone exposing the possibilities of change within life and geological strata. I would summarize Darwin, but we already have a good story of this, but in brief, he was a poor student, more interested in beetle collection than medical school work. Failing this, his father sent him to Cambridge to enter the ministry. Darwin wasn't really interested in this either. Fate would have him fall in with a group of naturalist theologians, and eventually he would graduate and then be recommended by his biology professor to join what I read was supposed to be a 2-year-long unpaid survey voyage aboard the HMS Beagle as a gentleman naturalist. During this time, Darwin read voraciously, collected all manner of specimens. You heard the story. He conversed with indigenous people and experienced the grandeur of the Amazon, which he called a chaos of delight. He observed fossils risen to the surface by geological forces, marveled at the similarities between extinct megafauna and modern animals. Famously, upon arriving at the Galapagos Islands, Darwin began to note distinctions between finches across the island chains that were speciated for particular food types, and tortoiseshells, which also seemed to differ, although allegedly his crew kept turning them into soup. From these specimens and Darwin's extensive notes, he began to formulate this world-changing idea that would become the nascent theory of evolution. But he understood how controversial this would be, and he understood what powers did to people who got a little too big for their britches. Think about Galileo, locked in a house. Arriving back in England, he married, bred pigeons, not for no reason. He bred pigeons to demonstrate what artificial selection was capable of. And he worked on this idea until pressure from his peers and his mentor effectively forced him to publish this magnum opus, this most famous work on the origin of species. This was a very delicate assertion on the interrelatedness of all animals, chock full of evidence and asserting that gradual change in generations over time can result in new sorts of species. And this is what evolution means. It doesn't mean snap your fingers, everything changes. It means a slow accumulation of changes over time that result in something new. You cross the horizon, essentially. It does not happen all at once. It's not like Pokemon. This was, of course, highly controversial, even as delicate as he tried to be. But for many, with an open mind and a ready heart, Darwin seemed to reveal the obvious. This was the case with the Transcendentalist Club in New England and Boston. Emerson calls it the most important book of the age. Thoreau writes about it frequently. We can find the impact of his work within our own tradition and our values of transformation and interdependence, which call us to heed the living flows of change and attend to the greater web of life. Endlessly does life go on changing, even here, even now. While Darwin left much unsaid, his work and that of his fellow intellectual progeny would serve to set us on the right direction, towards an understanding at once wondrous and absolutely weird, that all of life evolves according to this accumulation of change over time, change wrought by random chance, the forces of geology and time, by unseen, dispassionate forces. Such is a necessarily humbling perspective for those who know it's kind of like the pale blue dot of the 19th century. While some may shy away from the real fire of this revelation, might we be such a people who can not only take it in stride, but find cause to praise the wonders of this world, the miracle of consciousness and the promise of transformation? For from this vantage point of our present understanding, we can better grasp the livingness of the earth and the sacred nature of change. Now we move into a time of altar building, friends. This is a time for you to make some collective meaning with some of the symbols we have arrayed throughout the sanctuary here. Oh, and big special thanks to Pam Curtis Smith for getting us flowers this morning. Thank you, Pam. Oh, that one broke. Let's get a new one. And also for Tom Peterson for helping us arrange flowers. These flowers are for you. You can pull one off. You can take a whole bunch. You can keep one for yourself or give it to a friend, new or old. This is what they are for. In this same basket, because we understand that the beauty of a flower and the heaviness of a stone, just like the ups and downs in a human life, exist within one vessel. We have stones. If there's something in your heart that you've been carrying that you'd like to lay down, friends, I invite you to pick up a stone, feel its weight in your palm, connect whatever burden you might be carrying to that stone, and then when you're ready, give it back to the water. And here we have candles, which you can light, friends, if you want to cast some radiance on the day. Just give the stick to the fire, give the fire to a candle. Make sure it's out all the way when you're done. And also here, and maybe after you light a candle, there's some hand sanitizer. It is the season. In this box, we have our book of life, and you can write whatever you want to in the book of life, a prayer, a poem, a brief reflection. You might sign your name. You might stay anonymous. That's okay. Whatever's written in the book of life will be shared in an extemporaneous prayer of the people following altar building. Friends on Zoom, your chat box there, that's your chat box of life. You can do the same with the chat box. And because it is a sacrament as worthy of any of these, we do take our offering up during altar building. Lorraine, will you share the plate recipients here at Francis House?
Yes. Every month, Second Unitarian donates half of our offering to a local nonprofit. Our partner for November and December is the Siena Francis House. This year, Siena Francis House is proud to celebrate 50 years of dedicated service to provide shelter, meals, and a pathway to housing for any individual experiencing homelessness in Omaha. Additionally, the organization offers residential addiction and recovery services through the Miracles program and permanent supportive housing in the Siena apartments and the cottages. Social justice is at the heart of our church, and every day you show up. We have multiple ways for you to contribute. The altar box in front is part of altar building, or use the QR code on your order of service. Go to your website and click the donate button. Or if you mail a check to the church, please write "Share the Plate" in the memo line. We appreciate your generosity in supporting the Sienna Francis House and our church. With that, back to you and altar building, Reverend Juniper.
Thanks, Lorraine. And so y'all know the better part of these stations, except for the book and the box, are recreated in the back of the sanctuary as you came in. So if you're not feeling like being in front of folks, that's okay. They're back there. Also, we forgot to mention that we do record from this vantage point too, so our friends on Zoom can see our congregation, so a thing to keep in mind. And where you are is as holy a place as any, friends, as a sacred a spot as any, so don't feel pressured to be up and about if you don't want to be. You are good where you are, but this is your time. Friends, will you join me in that spirit of prayerful reverence as we hear these prayers of the people? Spirit of life and love and deep gratitude, that is that essential feeling that comes from being together, that central religious emotion, deep, welling gratitude. We gather in a time where gratitude can feel like a thing we have to hold on to tight, with so much wrong and so much that needs to be set right. May we have minds that can attune and can attend to what is still good, what is worth rooting ourselves in, what is worth preserving and saving and loving. We pray for all who would suffer under bondage or under bullets or under pain and oppression. And we pray that those oppressions and pains may be lifted soon, now, and that our hands can find where we are called to be, here locally, far away. Where can we be a leverage for real change, knowing that change often doesn't happen overnight, but where we can help evolve the state of this world through the accumulation of our shared efforts and our shared hearts and our collective caring. We pray for all in our own community and abroad who struggle with addiction, with loss, with pain and surgery and recovery and illness and all the things that burden the heart. We especially pray for our neighbors across the street whose house caught fire earlier this week. As we seek to find ways to help affect our community in positive fashion, may we be brave enough to ask, where am I called? What can I do? And attend the answer with an open heart and a ready and willing mind. And a reminder, friends, that pastoral care is available. All you have to do is ask. We have a wonderful care team, and I'm also happy to be present for you, whether you are a longtime member or just barely new. This community care is for you. Before I carry on, I do want to turn your attention to our announcements. I'm not going to go through all of these. You have them in front of you, but so you know, we do have our open mic next Sunday evening. Come pass through with a poem or a story or a song, or just come hang out. It's a good time. We also have pub theology that following Monday at Krug Park in Benson. We had Dave Nesbitt and Toma with us last time, and we had a wonderful conversation. We wrote our covenant, and you're welcome to come out and have a sip with us responsibly and talk about the big picture. And of course, there are holiday happenings, lots of stuff in your announcements here, and also in your e-news you can get once a week. But without further ado, the year was 1925. A high school teacher from Dayton, Tennessee, sat in a courtroom accused of violating the State Butler Act. That's a law in my old home state of Tennessee, preventing the teachings of human evolution in public schools. How terrible. Although Scopes himself was unsure whether he had ever actually taught this lesson in question, local business leaders and representatives from the ACLU saw an opportunity to bring national attention to what they viewed as an infringement on intellectual freedom and the separation of church and state. So this trial quickly escalates beyond a simple legal question to become a symbolic battleground over modernity, scientific education, the role of religious belief. Two of the most famous public figures of this era came to Dayton, little old Dayton, Tennessee. William Jennings Bryan, who is a celebrated populist politician and devout Christian, heard of those before, assisted the prosecution, of course, and while Clarence Darrow, one of the nation's most prominent defense attorneys and a fierce advocate for civil liberties, he represented Scopes. This dramatic courtroom exchange, particularly Darrow's decision to call Bryan to the stand as a self-proclaimed expert on the Bible, This highlighted deep cultural tensions in a nation grappling with rapid social and intellectual change. Reporters from across the world flocked to this trial, turning it into a pure media spectacle, amplifying the sense that the country was witnessing a decisive confrontation between faith and science. Scopes was ultimately found guilty and fined $100 whole. The trial had a more complicated legacy, though. Legally, it did uphold the Butler Act for a time, but culturally, the proceedings exposed the weakness of anti-evolutionary laws and galvanized public support for academic freedom. In the decades that followed, the so-called Scopes monkey trial became a touchstone in debates over the role of religion in public life, the authority of scientific knowledge, the purpose of public education. It endures today as a reminder that struggles over what we teach in our schools are never just about curriculum. These are about who we want to be as a society, how we negotiate the tensions between tradition and discovery and democratic pluralism. I know some of y'all are or have been teachers. Once a teacher, always a teacher, I reckon. And I know y'all know this is what education is really about. But there is a reality at once fearful and wondrous felt in the wake of evolution's story. In my research for this sermon, I had to wade through no small amount of frankly backwards thinking, blaming Charles Darwin and the better part of the scientific community from everything from bad science to the inception of the evils of scientific racism, which of course is the very same racism which Darwin's own work downright rejects. And why? Put simply, to follow the chart of evolutionary logic to its natural conclusion and applied to the human animal, this would see us squarely and surely descended from more than human creatures. In Darwin's time and for much of the 20th century, the whole missing link remained elusive. We have some idea of what this could be now. We can point to something like Australopithecus, little guy, Australopithecus. Maybe I'll try to find some recreations of them and share them on the Discord. Very interesting stuff. But how could Darwin know that we share 99% of our DNA with other primates like chimpanzees and bonobos, or 98% with gorillas, or 97% with orangutans, or 93% with rhesus macaques? How could we have known we as humans share more than 99% of our own DNA? And yet with a keen eye and an open heart, Darwin inferred as much and left us with this compelling story that interconnects us with this idea that we've talked about before, this Nguni Bantu word, Ubuntu, which means a bundle of life. That's a word Darwin may have never heard, but I feel it summarizes his theory really nicely. Yet a fearful reality looms for some folks. The promise of change, which would be a promise for many, would be a threat to some. To those who risk station and status, who must understand the human condition as wholly exalted and chosen amongst all other forms of life, and to those for whom, of course, every day is a question simply craving a bit of certainty, a bit of survival, some solid ground to be on. To some, this theory would render the world not a chaos of delight as Darwin saw the Amazon, but merely a kind of chaos. It is understandable to an extent. For the same reason, some folks insist that the earth is flat. Grifters are going to be grifting. And beyond, which reminds me, 'tis the season to look out for scams. Please read this. Please read that. Beyond that, these ideas don't obviously mesh with our daily observations. I mean, you see a squirrel one morning, you go to bed, you wake up, maybe you see the same squirrel, but the squirrel doesn't have dinosaur wings or something. It is, it's still probably, hopefully, a squirrel. Although I was born very close to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and we saw some weird-looking animals. Oh boy. Yep. So that's not even artificial selection. That's just kind of stuff that would probably keep Darwin awake at night. He didn't understand radiation either. But friends, things seem static enough, right? The sun rises and sets, people are born and people die, and it would seem that the earth is forever. But we know this to be untrue in the biggest picture. Some of Darwin's most stunning observations have less to do with finches and barnacles. He did say, I I've never hated a barnacle, so trying to categorize barnacles. But a lot of his observations had more to do with geologies. How do mountains and plains rise? Where do these bones come from? It was not until the 1970s that the scientific community reached some consensus on plate tectonics and the arguably evolutionary nature of the land itself, that things change over time. When we're talking about geological change, we're talking about really deep time. So bear with me as we go into really deep time. In a sense, I feel that I have experienced this, not as though I've been around for very long. I'm 37. The Appalachian Mountains are a lot older than that. Many years ago, on Scaly Mountain outside the aptly named Highlands, North Carolina, I stood upon a short cliff that looked over the Blue Ridge Mountains in central Appalachia. These are much lower than the Rocky Mountains, which you may be more familiar with. As I stood upon this ancient stone, I felt my mind turn to the eras of geology and the spirit of the mountain. A mountain is not merely a big bump in the ground. It is a happening, an event unfolding on these impossible scales of geological time. These rolling mountains became to me in that moment as great green waves, ancient ripples made smaller by erosion and tectonic forces and time, risen and first in some extremely ancient and no doubt violent cataclysm that took place long before this continent was stable, long before the planet Saturn had rings, long before this planet began to dream of creatures with bones. The Appalachian Mountains are older than the concept of bones on this planet. And from that perspective, you could kind of see, if one slowed one's perspective, that it's like waves on an ocean, frozen in time. And I'm reminded of that Blake poem, The Auguries of Innocence, where he writes, to see a world and a grain of sand and heaven and a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Such realizations must shake one awake. Consider the far future, friends. We consider the far past, the far future. Long after my homeland mountains are ground flat, after these prairies have become a desert and a jungle and a glacier and a prairie again, supposing your children's 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 and then some still call this world home, and most certainly if any have come to hypothetically, for whatever reason, call space or some other world home, we can surely bet that in the biggest picture, these kindred of ours would be something rather different. One of the most fearful revelations of evolution is that, given new environmental, social, and technological pressures, what it means to be human in these biggest pictures will change, both as an expression of culture and genetics. The fossil record makes it quite clear. Particular genotypes, particular kinds of species, including our own, are largely transient. We will invariably be changed. And I am, of course, reminded from that part of Octavia Butler's Earth Creed Manifesto. Everything you touch, you change. Everything you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. This is deep evolutionary time. Longer than Star Trek, longer than Dune, longer than Warhammer 40K. I mean, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, y'all. Odds are good that if we do not destroy ourselves, we as a species will become something more, or at least something different than we are now. Perhaps this will happen many times. If we do ever indeed settle on other planets, should those planets have different gravity, for instance, or predators, or climate, it could shape a whole new arc of evolution. Possibly. Personally, I find this very strange to consider. I am rather attached to being a human, as I'm sure most of you probably are. So what are we to take away from such a bizarre idea? What are you talking about, Juniper? Clearly, we ought not worry about such things in our day-to-day with its clear and present dangers to actual living and marginalized people, but I believe we could mark this as a star in the sky. However we come to understand ultimacy, the vastness, and our purpose and place within the great big everything, however we come to know God or gods or spirit, if indeed we know or feel these at all. No matter what happens, either in our minds or in our world, we can hold this promise of change and keep it alive within us. It does not mean things will necessarily just get better on its own. I think Theodore Parker, who Dr. King quoted, we'll talk about Theodore Parker next month, who said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice only if we jump up and pull it down, friends. It takes our hands, it takes our hearts and our efforts. No matter what we believe about all this stuff, though, change is possible, and we have a place within it, both as species, biologically, geologically, but also culturally and socially. Change is afoot, and it's got your name on it. This doesn't happen just for the sake of randomness, friends, but rather for possibility. Possibility. We can be selective about this kind of stuff, too. Some of us were at the OTAC issues meeting last Sunday. We talked about the difference in issues and problems, and about how we want to break issues down into things that we can actually solve, winnable things. This is sort of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, but targeted. How can we win? What can we do? This is how we shape justice too, with the sort of selective change, the pressures we put on this world. I take some small issue with Emerson's suggestion that a foolish certainty is the hobgoblin of the small mind. I do like that quote. He's onto something. But I'd say this particular hobgoblin lies more in the realm of the frightened heart, hungry for ontological purpose, real meaning hard-coded in our lives. What is it all here for? Such things can be gleaned in tradition and story, of course, but I reckon such things are best learned by actually living in this world, because it takes real courage to meet such forces of change, to integrate them into our broader understanding, and to forge and fashion a kind of faith in the face of all of this uncertainty. Arm to arm, heart to heart, mind to mind, we are many, and we are one, and we are many. And as we are in this time of harvest, and having spoken so much of so many great and good men, allow me to conclude with a poem by a woman, a favorite of mine, and likely some of yours as well, The Seven of Pentacles by Marge Piercy. Under a sky the color of pea soup, she is looking at her work growing away there, actively, thickly like grapevines or pole beans as things grow in the real world, slowly enough if you tend them properly, if you mulch, if you water, if you provide birds that eat insects a home and winter food, if the sun shines and you pick off caterpillars, if the praying mantis comes and the ladybugs and the bees and the plants flourish, but at their own internal clock. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. You cannot always tell by looking what is happening. More than half the tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Penetrate quietly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet. Bite persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden. Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar. Weave real connections, create real nodes, build real houses, live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving. Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in. A thicket and bramble wilderness to the outside, but to us, interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and layers. Live as if you liked yourself, and it just might happen. Reach out, keep reaching out, and keep bringing in. This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always. For every gardener knows that after the digging and after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes. Let us seek such a harvest, friends, one which roots us in real gratitude to belong and to be and to become on such a wild and weird and ultimately wondrous world as this. May the revelations of evolution and reason and science guide us not towards cynicism or fear, but towards a more genuine sense of kinship with other creatures, and most importantly, to other people, especially people who do not look like you or talk like you, people who do not move or live quite like you, people who do not believe like you, even people who challenge you. Let this not stop us from meeting the challenges of those who would lead with small minds or fearful hearts or hateful agendas, but let us never fail to understand these people as human as well, fallible, possibly redeemable, but most certainly full of questions. And let us meet the questions of those who are poor, who hunger, who live under the threat or experience of bondage and pain, those who ask who the helpers are. And let us meet the voice still and small within us, that would meet the breaking morning, and all of our life, that all of our life may be filled with courage, mindful for potential, ready to bring real change to life into this world, ready to answer our own questions. Where am I called? What am I to do? Let us cast our questions into the deep and pull up real purpose, friends. Will you join me in our final hymn, Blue Boat Home? Friends, will you read with me our chalice extinguishing? We extinguish this flame,
But not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Praise love from which all goodness shines. Praise freedom lifted to the skies. Praise the fires of the mind. Praise all the joy we've yet to find.
Prophetic Church, this world awaits your liberating ministry. As we go from this place, let us be fools for love and pilgrims for justice. And until we meet again, may we rock, roll, and move towards that spirit of beloved community on the horizon. Go in peace, stick around for refreshments. Social justice will be meeting downstairs in like 15 minutes.